Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off Air podcast. It is finally time to get through our end of season roundup. We're going to be taking a very, very brief look over the month of April. Not a lot to say on that one, I think, between any of us. But of course, this is time to cast our minds way back to the first Off Air podcast of the season, which, of course, was us making our Maidstone United predictions for the season. We're going to take a little look back over those, see how poorly they went. Let me tell you now, it is quite poorly. They did go indeed. I don't think anybody's got anything right, but that is the nature of the beast in this game. And I'm sure we can all have a good little laugh about it along the way. So, of course, joining me today is channel regular Sean Skur. Good evening, Sean.
Hello.
And Nigel Seeger as well. Welcome, Nigel. Good to see you.
Hello, you all right?
Very good, thank you. So, like I said, we're going to quickly take a very brief look over the month of April. Now, in April, Maidstone United scored 2 goals, both against Notts County in what you would have seen me posting many times on this channel, a 5-minute moment of madness. And that was it. We conceded 18 goals. We had the worst month of goal difference we've had this season, and that is about it. So I think we'll leave that there. That is April all wrapped up. So it's finally time to move on to the season breakdown. And I know the boys won't have anything else to add to April. So like I say, we'll leave that one there and swiftly move on. So, of course, taking into account how this season has gone for Maidstone, there were some high points. There were some moments where we thought amongst us that, this season could turn out all right. We thought, looking at how things were going at the start of the season, Maidstone United seemed like there was an opportunity to maybe build a little bit more than we thought. I know most of us on the channel here, of course, Connor as well, not currently with us, but he is obviously the behind the scenes man of the channel. But he also made his predictions, and everybody, I think, had us staying up, I do believe. And obviously that's not gone exactly to plan. However, Sean, back in August and those early September stages, I think everybody was kind of hopeful of that, weren't they?
Yeah, you're right, Joe. It was an okay start. I mean, we've gone through this behind the scenes before, and obviously on the channel as well. 10 points out of 18. We got the bulk of our wins in this particular month. The Alabi last-minute winner against Torquay, the Aldershot goal glut in that 5 minutes at the end of what was that bank holiday weekend at the end of August, the start of the season. And obviously we're sat here at the end of another bank holiday weekend on a very different scale of things. Of course, it was the York win at home that started everything off, an absolutely glorious, beaming, red-hot sunshine. I think drop points against Wealdstone potentially.
Yeah, 1-1 90th minute.
Then Dorking, home defeat.
We don't talk about Dorking.
And the Altrincham draw as well, because we were joint top with Gateshead for about 8 minutes at the start of the season. I was just looking it up until Gateshead scored after 6, we scored after 7. So we were nearly top of the division on our own. Briefly, but yeah, we joined Gateshead, and then everybody else got in on the act after about a quarter of an hour. So we did joke that the first half, even though defensively at Altrincham, I distinctly remember the fullback situation wasn't great. And I know on air on Saturday with everybody that was listening, we certainly made the point, Nigel and I, that with the last 20 minutes of the season, we managed to get a left back and a right back. So I think the writing was probably already on the wall in August, even though the results and the performances were there for Maidstone. We just, I think flattering to deceive at that initial stage. But a great start in August, as we've already said, those 10 points, 40% of our points for the season in that 1 month. And you think if we're going along at that sort of rate, that rate of knots, then you'd think, we should manage to be all right here, keep ourselves in that 16 to 20 position bracket that I think all of us had predicted and all of us had wanted. And as Joe's illustrated with the dropping of the pen there, it really drop off the edge of a cliff quite quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, exactly that. I mean, if you looked at the points we accrued in that, if we'd replicated those points, 10 from 6 throughout the season, that would have landed us about, what, 70 points? So we would have been well in the playoffs. I believe, we would have been doing really well if we'd maintained that. So, yeah, a good start. Unfortunately, it went downhill pretty quickly. We only managed to get 1 point in September. We only managed to get two in October and conceded 25 goals in that time as well in just 10 games. And yeah, I mean, it kind of dropped off pretty quick, didn't it, Nigel? And what do you think was a key contributor? Do you think that the reason we got all those points in August was maybe off the back of last season? Or do you think maybe something changed in that sort of September, October time that caused that downfall?
I don't know really. I think it probably was the momentum of last season that kept us, the first few months of the season kept us sort of on that upward trajectory. But once the injuries kind of kicked in, I mean, you mentioned it there, and I was recording this on the 1st of May. Oliver's put his statement out, and he said in that statement, didn't he, that you've done your podcast for. It's like third of our squad, and they weren't just like bit part players. They were
Mhm.
like the main earners, weren't they? I mean, and even to all right, we knew Luke was going to be out for at least 3/4 of the start of the season. And then his replacement that we got in Selwyn Joe Smith was injured. He didn't play. He played one game in pre-season, I think, didn't he?
Mhm.
And then Jerome Billen Williams was injured in the last pre-season game against Dulwich. And literally, the momentum carried us through for the first few months. But when those players don't come back, and then you can't get loan players in to replace those players, or if you do, you know, they're only on like month loans and they're not really. They take time to settle into a squad. You're always behind the eight ball, aren't you? You're always playing catch up, and I think that was where we are. I mean, we did have a little brief upturn, and then we got out of the relegation zone, didn't we, towards the end of November when we had that away win at Scunthorpe and then the home win the following week at home to Maidenhead. And at that point, we was, I think, about fifth, sixth from bottom, and quite a little bit of a cushion between the teams that were below us. But yeah, obviously we were saying on air on Saturday at Chesterfield on the Stones Live commentary that the turning point for me was that Dorking game. We went into that game only 2 points behind Dorking. And when at the end of 90 minutes we was 2-1 up, and lose those two goals were just like, Peter's had his red card in that game, so we were sort of hanging on with 10 men. But if we'd have held on with that, I think we would have probably been okay. We just lost Stanford as well, because we'd lost him the week before. Cause I think that Dorking game was when Barden made his debut. So, holding on to those 3 points there, because that 3 points that Dorking picked up at that time took them 3 or 4 points off the playoffs at that time. So, there wasn't a big gap between where we was and the playoff places, but, it just kind of sucked the life out of the team after that game. And then we went into the Christmas and New Year period, and we, again, didn't get anything, did we? And, the performances were there in spells, I guess, but it was never anything to sort of like, we could never get a run going. Couldn't keep a consistent 11. How many games this year have we had the same 11?
Mhm.
I think you could probably count it on one hand. So yeah, it was just a mixed bag, really. There was games in there, and there was times in games when we did have spells in games, but it just wasn't that consistency. I think I said it in our group chat, didn't I? I think that Notts County game probably summed us up. Summed up that season. We were 2-0 down pretty quickly. We had that spell where we looked like we was a team that was competing with Notts County. We had them on the back foot, we had them on the ropes. Using the boxing term, but you just can't roll with those punches. And as soon as they get an opportunity and they score, all that sort of pressure that you built up at that point just goes, and you can't do anything with that. If you're constantly going behind in games and not able to hold on to leads. I mean, how many times this year did we hold on to a lead?
I'm sure
You can't. You
Sean's got
know,
a stat in there somewhere.
yeah. There you go, Sean.
It's his time. Get in quick.
Bear with.
Right, carry on, Nigel. Let him.
All for time, guys.
But
Let him do his
those
digging.
last minute, those last minute win. We weren't just conceding. Well, Chesterfield we did, didn't we? No, Chesterfield we scored late. Then at home they scored
Two,
the
yeah.
winner with the last kick. Actually, Woking again the same. Wrexham again the same. And they're all sides that are up the top of the league. So it was proven that we can compete with those teams, but just not over the course of the season. We just didn't have the squad depth to be able to mount any consistent pressure on teams and put them under that, worry them. And, there's games, especially towards the end of the season, where you're sitting there thinking, these teams are no better than us, but that the mistake from Maidstone is just going to happen. I mean, I was sat there thinking of that at Halifax. I didn't think they was a better team than us, but you just know that once a mistake happens, that's it. The floodgates open, and that's what proved to be in that game. And there was many games like that where it was our own undoing. Mistakes at the back. We conceded over 100 goals. You're never going to get. No matter if you score 50 plus goals, you're never going to be. If you're losing goals to 2-1 ratio, you're never going to be successful, are you? So, there lies the problem.
Key point, Nigel, you stated there, certainly the Halifax and Chesterfield performances the last fortnight away of the season. Desaruwa, Dallas, McCallum, Cole Clough, Ali, that's just 5 forward players who would walk into our team any day of the week.
Yeah.
And you look at all the other sides that we played, obviously with Oldacre getting the winner at home against us back in September, Mullin for Wrexham, Langstaff for Notts County. It's the killer instinct up front that has been so lacking from us this season, and losing Barham when we did February, March time to Aldershot, to a rival, however much of a good deal it was for the club, showed you that this season the writing had been on the wall probably since Hack's dismissal. The 2 stats to mention that we wanted there. Maidstone went ahead 14 times in the league this season. We lost 6 of those and drew 4 of those. So only 4 times have we won by taking the lead and staying in the lead. And of course, we only won 5 league games. So we won 1 game from behind.
That was York, wasn't it?
York, very first game.
Win, exactly. And then the other 4 were just stay in front. And even the Maidenhead one typified it, because we had to be 2 goals ahead.
Just have the cushion.
Just to have the cushion, because we conceded in stoppage time, that Maidenhead one. The other stat, of course, is one I've mentioned on air, I've mentioned on here, and certainly Jesus H. Christ, our Lord and Saviour, Fred Atkins, with the Bromley game as well, which was one that finished it off. I think it was 10 times we had conceded in the 90 plus minutes, or certainly 9 in the league, but 10 overall, where we conceded in stoppage time, which had cost us too many points.
Yeah,
and if
it's a lot.
Even half of those, we'd be within a shout of, maybe taking it to the 15th or the 22nd of April rather than the 1st. So,
yeah, I think we've pretty much summarised there exactly why Maidstone are in the position they're in. I think obviously a lot of us will understand that. Those listening at home obviously share very similar opinions to that, I can imagine. Obviously Oliver Ash's statement that come out today, the time we're recording, if you haven't seen it on the channel, go and check it out. He did tweet a little statement, a bit of a statement of intent, but also a statement regarding the season so far, talking about how the errors they've made have contributed to the position we're in, and it's good to see a bit of accountability, I suppose, but yeah, I think everybody kind of shares very similar opinions to that. Obviously, looking at the goals conceded, I don't know if you've got another stat for us, Sean, but putting you on the spot a bit here. But 104 goals conceded. Of course, that is more than Dover last season, a team that had a handful of senior players featuring regularly in their side amidst a lot of controversy. Only accrued 1 point in the season. Of course, 13 overall because of 12-point deduction, but 13 points, and that's all they got all season, and they still conceded less goals than us. So, do you know how that shapes up against kind of National League records in terms of goals conceded?
I do remember reading this out on air on Saturday as well. So glad that you zoned out whilst listening in on Saturday. No,
I'm just setting you up for a stat, mate. That's your job.
I've walked us both into the post there. It's fine. No, we did play 2 more matches than Dover as well, so the aggregate is slightly, probably slightly in our favour by a point, sod all, frankly. But yeah, I think I remember stating, I'll pull it up again anyway, but I think it was Hyde about 8 or 9 years ago. I think they conceded 119. Yeah, so it was Dover 101 last season with 2 games fewer. Hyde conceded 119 in the 2013-14 season when, somewhat ironically, Hack and John won Luton the league with 101 points. It was the first time we conceded over 100 goals since the 67-68 season. We conceded 131 in 38 games, averaging at 3.5 per game. So this season could have been a lot worse. And the only time even worse than that was the 50-51 season, where we conceded 104 goals in 26 games, which averaged out at 4 goals every game. And those 3 seasons, this season, 67-68 and 50-51, that is 3 of the 6 seasons we've finished bottom. And with defending as bad as that each time, 100 plus goals, you're going to finish bottom. So I know it helps to have the killer instinct up top, but if you're going to ship a few less at the back, I know it sounds obvious, but the stats just very simply state we were bad.
Indeed. You actually got onto what I was going to query next. Obviously, we spoke off air about what exactly this season looked like compared to those in Maystone's history. And as you can tell, even going back 60, 70 plus years, this is up there with one of the worst we've had. An arguable top 5, I think, is fair to say, in the worst that we've had. Most certainly a top 10. Nigel, obviously a lot of people have highlighted defenders as some of the better players in Maystone's side this season. Obviously, George Fowler picking up player of the season. I think, at stages, Joe Lowell had good periods at the start. And of course, Kevin Burko, Jerome Bidon-Williams, Reece Greenwich, Sam Bone. These are all players that people have taken quite a fancy to, especially in recent weeks and months. What do you think really is the sole cause of these goals going in? Do you think it's a lack of organisation, a lack of cohesion? Because obviously we've got decent individuals. Everyone can see that by the individual performances they put in on a weekly basis. But when it comes to a team unit, it's not quite working, is it?
No, and I think that's the key. I think, you go on to that with the George Elokobi appointment. Even Hakan was a defender in his days. I think he was like a right wing back or right. I certainly played down that right side. George was a defender as well. So from that point of view, you think they'd have experience to learn on, but I think it's just the unit. I mean, a lot of it. I think the goalkeeper is part of that as well. I mean, you can't really sort of the goalkeeper situation hasn't been ideal this season. Whether you're in the Tom Hadler camp or the Eustace Merton camp, I don't think chopping and changing all the time helps any goalkeeper. I think you should have you are the number 1 and you are the number 2, so you know where you stand, and it almost seems like there's so much pressure on them to perform the keepers this year that, and then one mistake they'd be shipped out of the team and they'd be on the bench for a couple of weeks, and until the next mistake. But yeah, I just think it's a collective. They're not. Sometimes we just defend as individuals. We don't defend as a team. How many times have we said on commentary or when we've been in the stands and when we're not commentating? Sometimes our defense is just like a knife through butter. It's just one or two quick passes, and we're just all at sea. There's no, there's no line there. We don't know whether we're defending high, whether we're defending deep, or you know, it's there just didn't seem to be any sort of cohesion with it, and I think it didn't help. Like we said at the beginning of the season, where you had the right back playing at the left back, and then vice versa, and the centre back, as in George Fowler's going out and playing in the right back, and we've had Bivish playing there a few times. It's just been, it's like any sort of team, isn't it? To form a cohesive unit, you need to have partnership. So you need to know who your two centre backs are. I mean, last year, you knew that Joe Law was going to be starting, and you knew that George Fowler was going to be beside him. They had that understanding between them, and then they knew which one was going to go for a header ball, which one was going to be the one that be the covering defender. They knew when to push up together. They knew when to go back together. It was just there. But when you're not playing the same person alongside you, you're swapping from about in the defence. You just don't know. I mean, we've said it before on this podcast as well. I mean, the Gateshead game was the one that for me in the early part of the season, because George was kind of playing out on the right back, but he was still trying to cover his position in the centre back and just drifting across and leaving that whole gaping right side, open. And it was just there was just no cohesion. I think, like you say, the point you were making was that yes, individually they're all good defenders, but they're not playing as a unit. And I think that's what you need. You need that cohesive unit to be successful.
Yeah, I think the partnerships thing is for me probably the biggest thing. Obviously, Joe Lowell referenced that in a tweet of late, of course. After I think Tom Hadler was getting some stick. Basically, he referenced the fact that they had such a good unit at the back, a good relationship between him, Fowler, and Hadler, and they all knew each other's role. They all knew exactly what you said, Nigel, about who's going to be the dominant centre back, who's going to be the sweeper. I don't know how many times, especially in recent weeks, we've seen more than one player going for the same ball. That seems to be a characteristic that happens very, very regularly of late. Johan Zuma and Sam Bone both going up for the same header, or similar things to that. And to me, that is just a poor lack of allocation of responsibility. There's not been that one person who's, whether that be the manager or the captain or the defenders themselves, have gone, right, my role in this game is going to be, when that ball comes over the top, I'll attack it, you follow the runner. And that's just not something we've done at all this season, it seems. And I think that's probably due to an intensity change. We're probably not really up to speed. I know obviously we've had a whole season, but it's very hard to disagree that the National League is almost 2 leagues ahead of the South. I mean, compared the standards in some of them, some of the teams in there, you're comparing Concord with Wrexham. We've said
it so often, Joe, though, haven't we, that there's mistakes that get punished at National League level that in National League South just do not get punished.
Yeah, not at all.
At all, or just much less. But talking of the consistency of selection, if I may, Joe, and certainly what Nigel said and you're backing up, I'll come at it from the statistical angle. Can you name me the top 3 appearance makers in defence for Maidstone this season?
I'm going to go George Fowler.
Number 1's obvious, and you've bagged him already.
I'm going to go Joe Lowell. I know he's in the 20s. And I'm going to say Ryan Galvin.
Nigel, you got anything different, or are you sticking or twisting on the Parkhouse decorum down here?
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think. I'll maybe put Reece Greenwich in there. I mean, he was quite from Notts County. He played quite consistently until he
had 12, and I think that puts him probably in the middle third. I'm looking through this lot.
Go on, Sean, spill the beans.
Yeah. Top is Fowler, obviously, only missed the 7 games in the league season. Galvin at 24 however forward he played a lot of the time, vis-a-vis him and Bingham Williams. Hoyt and Bingham Williams both getting 19 appearances this season. But indeed, Joe Ellel was the third highest defensive appearance maker, a man who left in January. And obviously, since he
and
left,
didn't play every game either.
Indeed, up to that point, when you consider that there's no win in 25, and Joe Ellel managed to play in 21, mostly the start of the season, you could be a bit of a flippant git and say that, oh, well, managed to lose pretty much every game since Joe left. But what we're trying to get at, as Nigel started off in this particular part, is it's the consistency of selection. It's that back four. I have banged on about it since about the 46th minute away at Altrincham, when Vincent got taken off.
Yeah.
And then Deacon and Hoyt were both playing fullbacks on opposite sides and getting pushed from pillar to post. And it's been like that until the 71st minute at Chesterfield, a whole 266 days apart, is that you need the consistency of your selection. And if Fowler had been in the middle for most of the season with a Greenwich, with a Mensah, with a Brown, with an Ellel, consistently for 10, 15 games in a row, you build that partnership. I always come back to Newcastle because they're another club very close to my heart. But I think it's been only one match where that back five has been different for Newcastle this season. And they've conceded the fewest goals in the Premier League still in bloody May. So
there's your point.
Right. That's literally the point made, isn't it? They're doing something right, because you go, oh, he's not so good there. He's not so good there. He's this, he's that. But they've played together that long. They all know what they're doing and why they're there. The consistency of selection is what is needed. So then you go to Oliver's point, 1/3 of the playing budget has been on the slab this season at any one time. So it's not an excuse, but it certainly shows you that the chopping and changing that's had to be done by both Hack and now George and his management team, it does show you that the consistency hasn't been available to Maidstone, unfortunately. And that's the big trouble that we've had this season. Yeah. And that just sums it up, unfortunately.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we've now taken a look back over pretty much the whole season. Obviously not too much to speak on. I know Nigel touched on it at one point over, Christmas. We didn't get any points. November, I don't think we got any points. Or no, November we got 8, wasn't it? And then November we got 8. December we got 0, and I think January we might have got 1. But yeah, like I say, nothing really to write home about there. So I think it's probably time to brush that season aside. I know we all agreed on the player of the season vote, so it's not worth bringing that up again. We all agreed there was George Fowler, I think. So who did you say, Sean?
I said Booty.
Oh, well, there you go.
Had the most goal, scored, assist, contributions.
Yes,
Slightly more than Deacon, and that was my argument.
Oh, Leicester might have just relegated Everton. In other news,
nice. And Arsenal have just gone out the Champions League as well, conceded in the 119th minute.
Oh, poor Arsenal ladies. That's not good.
That's not. Although they might have a chance here, to be fair. But anyway.
We'll keep a second eye on that. But yes, so it's probably best now we get on to our start of the season predictions. So I'm more than happy to go first and take the embarrassment. So let's go through what we think now versus and then we'll get on to what we originally said. So where Maidstone ended up finishing, we ended up finishing 24th, of course. So the 4 categories we did were: where are Maidstone going to finish, who's going to be the top scorer this season, who's going to be the player of the season, and who's going to be the surprise package. Now, I know the surprise package is a little bit ambiguous. There's obviously no voting on anything like that, but I'm sure we'll come up with something. So, of course, 24th was where we ended up finishing. Top scorer, I believe, Jack Barham. Am I wrong with that? Yep. So Jack Barham, and then player of the season obviously was George Fowler. Surprise package, Who are we thinking on that one, boys? Any names? Josh Onibare, maybe.
Maybe Ryan Galvin, I think, would probably be a shout for the.
Yeah,
If you're saying that, but we didn't know he was even available at the beginning of the season, did we? So
yeah,
it's not a name that you would
cool.
have, associated with us. But
Yeah. So let's compare where we ended up. So obviously Maidstone 24th. At the start of the season, I thought Maidstone were going to finish in 16th. So exactly 1/3 up the table from where we ended up. I don't think that was particularly a very audacious thing to say at the time. I thought that with the right recruitment and the right cohesiveness and the lack of injuries, we probably could have done something around there. And I'm pretty sure you boys were quite similar in your prediction, weren't you?
yeah, I had us as 15th, so pretty much similar to what you had. And I was, for the same reasons. I just thought, that momentum that we carried over from being champions would carry us through. And the recruitment that we'd done up until that point, we didn't know that Sol was going to be out of the equation, and Henry Woods.
we're getting onto it. We'll get on to
Yeah.
Henry Woods and Sol.
But but those sort of players, you think, yeah, they can make an impact, and I'd sort of done my 1 to 24 loosely, and you think we can pick up those points, and we just didn't. And that was pretty much what we've covered so far, and the reasons why.
Sean, you had us finishing 18th.
I believe 18th,
Yeah.
yes. And that, again, to echo a couple of things that were said on Saturday, you would have hoped that the momentum would have been there for Maidstone to potentially get themselves near to a mid-table or top half finish. You only have to look at the likes of Oldham, who were down there with us for so long. They only ended up finishing about 7 points off of the playoffs, I think, in the end. Southend as well struggled. They were only 3 or 6 points off from memory as well. But yeah, the momentum can work both ways. It's the double promotions that you've seen from Norwich and Southampton in the last 10, 15 years. Leyton Orient sort of achieving it a little bit. Wrexham potentially might well do next season. But then you look at the likes of Scunthorpe getting the double down as well, and them not being able to stop the rot this season. So the momentum works both ways, good and bad. Clearly, for Stones fans, we're hoping that the rot stops very early on next season, and we'll obviously speak a bit more about next season. The other thing to comment on was something that I said so often on this broadcast is that you need to beat the teams around you. And I stated on Saturday quite rightly that the 5 wins that we had were all teams in the bottom 7. And we only beat all of them once. If we'd have beaten all of them twice, you're looking at another 10, 12, 13 points. That puts us closer to 40. You're then looking at all those opportunities where we're just not holding out at the end. And that 30 odd points that we've dropped in stoppage time, half of those you're safe. All of those you're in the playoffs. Now, we've held pretty much all of the top 7 until stoppage time at home, frankly, bar Notts County. But it's frustrating to keep going over it, but it's so true that we've had the potential there this season with the playing staff we've had, and it's not all about us not having the luck. It's just, in another timeline and another part of the multiverse, there's a season where we're all going, oh crikey, we're hosting, or we're going to Woking tomorrow for bloody quarter-final playoff. Ugh. But a lot of the players that we've had have been good enough. They've just not been able to show it, and man, it's just There's so much that we could have done, so much potential we've shown in games, and the stats bear that out with how close we've come, how many players we have at the top of some of the stat leagues, like seeing Regan Booty's stats. This is why I love George and I want him to stay for next season. I know Regan's gone. That's been announced in the last couple of hours. But
check the video out.
Indeed. Yeah, click here. But yeah, with Booty, just some of the stats, he's one of the league leaders for distribution and getting the ball forward. And I've always blown his metaphorical trumpet for how good he is. And I'm sad to steady, and I'm sad to see him go. But he is a player who will achieve. If you think that Oldham lacked a bit of cutting it, well, it was more the defensive side until Unsworth came in. But if you think Booty could go into an Oldham side, where everybody's presuming he's going because it's up north, if you think that what they achieved without him this season, if you think someone, a ball player like him from deep, getting from the back third to the front third very quickly, if you have the better players or better players than the defenders you're up against, you're going to be likely to get yourself a lot more chances. So Booty is like they have in MLS. They like to do the assist to the assister, and I always said that Booty, if you manage to break that down further as well, you'd probably see Booty would probably get another 10, 15 goal contributions to what Maidstone had, and you'd probably see that he'd be closer to 30 goal contributions rather than the 18, 19 that he'd got. So crucial player, and train of thought slightly going there. But yeah, a lot of potential this season. Some of the players we've had have performed well, but just not at the exact moments we needed them right at the death, unfortunately.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's been those fine margins all season, hasn't it? You know, those slim losses to teams we've been so close to getting a result against. I think we've pretty much been the maybe men of this season. You never know, we might get some, or maybe there's a chance. And I think, yeah, Notts County game at home the other day really epitomises that. So that is how far off we were in our league prediction. We probably should have done a goal scored, goals conceded. I think we probably would have all been about 60 off from that. But top scorer is the next on the list. Now, of course, I'm going first, and that means I've probably got to name the most embarrassing shout of the lot. I said, and I'll justify it. I try to. I said Hadi Gandor would be Maystone's top scorer this season. And as Sean looks to try and find Hadi Gandor in amongst this Maidstone United squad, he's nowhere to be seen. And neither was my logic, really. My logic behind it, of course, if you have watched the original podcast, was that I believed Jack Barham was probably going to go at a relatively early to mid stage of the season. I mean, he went. I was a bit early in my prediction, and I thought after the pre-season that he had, Gandor looked pretty good. I thought, he looked a lot quicker, a lot sharper, a lot more technical, something we hadn't really seen from him at the end of last season, despite picking up a couple of goals. And I thought he was probably going to be the main forward we'd see in this team. Turns out he played 10 games and scored no goals. So, Nigel, what's your prediction?
Yeah. Okay, that was a one-show segue, that wasn't it? Yeah, well done, Genus.
Well, I did go for Jack Barham, so,
Well done, Nigel.
That's probably the only... wasn't much logic there, it's just the fact that
he's a good player.
Luque was missing. We knew Luque was missing for the rest of the season. Next top scorer, Barham.
1
something
+
to
1
prove.
is 2.
Exactly. There you go. That was the logic behind that.
Sean, I'm pretty sure you said Barham as well, didn't you, mate?
What Nigel said.
Yeah. So, on to the player of the season now. Of course, George Fowler was the man who ended up with that supporters player of the season vote in the end. And we've got some fantastic shouts here. I think mine is considerably the least embarrassing. Mine was Sam Corn. Sam Corn ended up playing 26 games, bagged himself 4 goals before getting a season-ending injury a good few months ago now. So, of course, not the most influential players, played about half the games for us this season. And to be fair, there's not too many players who've got more than 26 games in this Maidstone side this season. So I suppose it's not that bad. But yeah, I think even Sam would say he didn't have the best of times at certain points during his playing time this season. It's been a difficult season for him, of course, with that injury. Hopefully we'll see him again next season. But again, way off the mark there from myself. So, Sean.
Seventh highest appearance maker in the league, FYI.
For Maidstone. Yeah. So, yeah. Sean, player of the season, who was your vote?
I believe mine was Tom Hadler, open parentheses, who's going to be in goal most for Maidstone would
Yusuf Mersin, what a pick. Well
uh,
done.
whoever would end up being in goal would take the brunt of the flack, which seemingly has been the case. Our keepers doing our keepers' things. And there was that brief period in November where we got 3 of our 5 clean sheets in the league this season. And Mr. Sanford, that's that song, isn't it? Mr. Sanford, play me a song.
Yeah, man.
Something like that.
Off air podcast.
We get a bit doolally with the season we've had, let's be honest. So we had 3 clean sheets in 5 with Sanford. Obviously, he goes, Barden comes in, Barden gets his terrible injury. You know, if the consistency of selection, I'll keep coming back to it, if Sanford had been available between when he came in and the end of April in that hypothetical world, that back line would be a lot more solid, a lot more consistent, a lot more capable. So, yeah, it's me clutching at the flimsiest and crappiest of straws. But I'm saying that because we're going to get battered because we've just come up, the goalkeeper is going to help us a great, great deal. And that had been shown in that brief November window when we were playing well at the back and had steadied the ship. Obviously, as soon as Sanford disappeared, so did our hopes. So there's quite a few points in the season, you know, that first day at Altrincham, Sanford disappearing and Dorking going completely awry. Our goalkeeper would have been the player of the season if he'd played more than the, 6? No, how many did he play? 7. 7 for Sanford. And you think we got 3 clean sheets in that lot?
So that was Sean's attempt to justify a goalkeeper getting player of the season when we've conceded 104 goals. So you can debate amongst yourselves in the comments or online whose is more embarrassing of a pick, Sean or Nigel. Nigel, who's your player of the season 9 months ago, my friend?
Yeah, yes, go Nigel. Dig
Well,
up.
I'm listening to your justifications for your players. I'm thinking,
This sounds really harsh, by the way. Like it at the time, it wasn't necessarily a bad pick. But
well, it was because it was Henry Woods. I don't think he even had 104 minutes, did he? But
but at the time, the justification for that, I feel, was quite good. He was a National League experienced player. He was someone that you'd credited as being very conducive to the way our midfield plays, a good support man for Corn who gets forward more booty, who can spray passes from deeper, and Henry Woods is there to just mop up the rest. And I think it wasn't necessarily a bad shout. It's turned out to be a god-awful one. But Nigel, tell us a bit more about it.
well, I don't know. I just really don't know. I suppose, like you said, for your surprise package, you know, the pre-season, he kind of looked okay. I suppose the fact that we played a fee for him allegedly, you know, you've got to sort of think to yourself, well, you know, that they obviously went out and got him and, you know, target him to come in. So they must see something in him that they like. But, well, we don't know, do we? Do they know what they saw in him that they like? Because we've not ever seen
He
him
could be
play.
really good.
You know, he's been unlucky with injuries. We can say that. But I don't think he even appeared in the Kent Senior Cup game, did he? So
I wouldn't know. I don't think anybody went. That game didn't exist, did it?
He
But,
played 75 minutes in that one,
Oh
Nigel.
well,
did he? Well, there you go.
Yeah. He got
That's probably
he got subbed on early, I believe.
Oh, good. Well, at least he can get
subbed on
subbed
early
off.
and he got 5 minutes.
No, 75.
Oh,
So,
75.
Yeah, Hoyt
5
came on
minutes.
after for 15 and Henry Woods came in. So you quickly
They brought him on early. He's come on in
Yeah.
the 89th minute.
Square pegs round holes. Our right backs come off injured, and Henry Woods has played for the other 75 without
Yeah,
Hoyt.
but-
So make of that what you will.
Yeah, I mean, you
There you
can't
go.
really
And
blame
that
him for that.
was Hoyt's injury. And we haven't seen him until Sheffield on Saturday. So, you know, it's just.
That makes up about a quarter of Henry Woods' play time this
Right
season
back
as well.
against
Senior Cup
Corinthian.
game. Exactly. Yeah, where less than 100 people went. And the only commentary we didn't do pretty much between us and between all of us on Stones Live. Shout out to all our boys and boys on Stones Live. Massive.
Check out the Stones highlights on my channel.
Both of them.
Yep. So, after that horrendous set of shouts, that's got to be the worst. Player of the season's got to be the worst. We were all absolutely god off the mark. But surprise package. Surprise package was, again, not exactly great for all of us. I went for Henry Woods. Wasn't expecting perhaps quite the impact that Nigel had predicted, but I thought it'd be a very good player for us, someone who went a bit under the radar, someone who would contribute to this team in a roundabout way, someone who could help tick things over for us and steady the ship and lead us to a slightly more successful season than what we've seen, but obviously did not go that way with the 4 games that he did end up playing this season. And Sean, who was your surprise package, mate?
I believe mine was Christy Patterson.
It was.
Memory. And to be fair, the start that he had, I mean, the Dorking game, for example, in the league at home, he absolutely bloody run himself into the ground. Could have had a hat trick.
I think he got 2 assists in the Aldershot game as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he scored at home to Dorking and Maidenhead, and he got both Barham and Gurung Aldershot assists. Set up Corn's opener against Wealdstone at home, and set up Galvin as well at Eastleigh before that all went to Poopy Town. So yeah, I mean, he had 6 goal contributions before the end of the calendar year. So in terms of the consistency he would have wanted to strive for, and I personally and a lot of us would want him to have got to, he was getting there on the up and up. And, you know, there's been a few occasions where he's played with a bit of personal grief and aggro going on around him, but still put in some fantastic performances for Maidstone, mostly last season. But again, he was probably one of, you know, if you're going to pick a top half, bottom half set of players, I'd still probably put Patterson in the top half of the performance we've had this season. For, again, the amount of contributions he's made at the top end there, you know, 6 goal contributions in total doesn't put him too far behind the likes of Booty, Deacon, and Barham. Frankly, I mean, it's only 3 behind Barham in that sense overall. So, yeah, I'm just trying to convince myself and go, yeah, he's probably about 4th or 5th. Who's that above him? Gurung. Gurung? Oh, I've gone wrong. Oh no, it's Bench. Yeah, Gurung's not near that. Yeah, so he's definitely probably about 4th overall. So I'd like
could be worse.
Yeah, I'd like to think that's the least bad.
That's a middle of the. I think that's a good top middle tier pick there.
Yeah, I've had Barham for top scorer and Patterson as surprise. I'm quite happy with my overall season predictions. I'm going to put that out there. That's could have been a hell of a lot worse, gents.
Nigel, your surprise package. Now I think Nigel's got the most accurate one because it was a bloody surprise he was out for so long. So Nigel, your surprise package this season.
Well, you tell me, because what I've got written down here isn't. You tell me what you put.
Oh, I've got you down as Sol as your surprise package.
I think that's what I did go for in the end.
Yeah.
But the other name I had written down here was Paris Cohen Hall. So
what a surprise! He didn't even sign.
No.
He trialed 1 game in pre-season.
Technically, that wins then, I think.
Yeah, that's really surprising. It surprised us. So well done, Nigel. You win.
I had Diego Armando Maradona in my one as well, but that's
Nigel, the medal's on the way, mate. You can't see it, but I've got my medal on the wall here. It's coming to you.
But yeah, you know, I remember saying about Sol, which came because of his pre-season.
Donut. Oh god, you definitely didn't say that on the podcast. I watched it back early. You definitely didn't say Paris Cohen.
He might have fought it though.
I'll probably fought it. Yeah.
That's a definite fought crime.
You just didn't want to. You didn't want to let out any potential signings that we might have announced after that. So
probably
that's
probably what I've written it down.
Yeah, this is where we blooming go. Oh, I don't know. Who's your player of the season for next season, Nigel? Oh, I know. It'll be blooming Lionel Messi. Oh, whoops! I've leaked. He's coming in. Can't believe it. Paris going on. He's finally coming in. But Yeah. So Wandro Smith, obviously a really good player when he's fit, but certainly a surprise in the fact that he has missed such a large portion of the season. It's cost us points. Let's be honest. It's cost us a player who we thought would probably replace Luke in his ability, and yeah, unfortunately, that's not gone down too well. But that is our season predictions revisited, I suppose you could say. Um, Hopefully, everybody watching had similarly as entertaining ones as ourselves. I'm sure there's a few of you out there who've got slightly better polished mystic magic balls that you can have a little glance into. Obviously, ours were right at the back of the cupboard and dusted over, but now it's time to take a quick look into next season. Obviously, this isn't going to be our complete preview of next season. We are just going to have a little glance into it. We're going to be talking a little bit about what we've seen of late, of course, a few of the exits and a few of the potential incomings. We obviously won't go into so much information because we haven't got all day, but that's for another podcast. However, with the Oliver Ash statement, bit of intent there. We're looking to build for those top places in the National League South next season. We're looking to have a few incomings announced within the next few days. That's a good sign to me. I said in my video today that last season we took quite a while to announce a lot of players, I thought, but now we're looking at announcing them before the playoffs are even over. That's pretty good for me. So, Nigel, taking a look towards next season, you are pretty staunch on what you feel Maidstone are going to achieve next season. So give us a brief insight into that.
Well, I've said it, and I said it on air on Saturday on Stones Live. I'm adamant that I think we're going to go up next year. I think, I don't think as a fan base we should be embarrassed about saying that. We are, and I've said it over many, like the last few weeks. Whatever our failings are at National League level, we are a good National League South Cup. Consistently performing at the top end of that table. The owners know what kind of budget you need to be successful in that league, and we have been. In the last two of the last three complete seasons, we've got promoted. So and we only didn't this year because we weren't in the league. So it's sort of like, I think we've had that period where we've known we've been relegated since the beginning of April, so we've actually been able to go out and identify our targets. And I think that's what you were saying earlier today. We didn't make our first signing until Seoul last year. That was pretty late. I think towards the end of May when we did announce it. And then it seemed like we were getting players that other clubs didn't want. You know what I mean? They were. You could look at them and you think, oh yeah, Alabi, he's played at National League level, so it's they were players that other clubs had got rid of, and the same for Corley. They were players that other clubs were getting rid of, and we might pick a few of those up. There is that filter down effect, but I think what has sort of impressed me is that the club have identified their targets. They've gone out and they've scouted those targets. They've, would have obviously been speaking to players that they've played with other clubs, how they fit into the dressing room. It's that, but being part of the team, it's not just you could have 11 really good players, but if they don't perform as a team, like we alluded to earlier, they're not going to pick up many points, are you? So it's about getting that right balance. And I think from the signs I've seen, and also and the announcements in the last few weeks as well, not just Oliver's statement today, but at Gallagher, the Gallagher group, doing their sponsorship, extending their sponsorship, Manchester extending their sponsorship. We've got a new back of the shirt sponsor as well. All to sort of put money into that playing budget. So I think, the signs are looking good that we're at least going to be competitive, and that's all you can ask for. It does come down to luck, doesn't it? George is, as we've said, and it's mentioned on the forums, he is unproven, but I think what is in George's favour is that he is recently retired, so there's going to be players that he's played with in a dressing room, and he's quite an influential figure in that dressing room. So players will remember that, So there's players that he would have played with, and that they all talk to each other, so he can get those contacts. And Craig Fagan as well. I mean, he's played at quite a high level, so he's going to have his contacts that he's going to get in. I just think that balance, when it's all put together, we'll see us competing at the top end of the league, and then you're down to who wants it more, aren't you? There's going to be 3 or 4 teams that are going to be up there, and it just comes down to luck with injuries and suspensions and players performing at the key times. So that would be my prediction at this stage.
I think that's quite accurate. I think that's something that, if things click, if things go right under George, he gets some good players in. He manages to get a bit of cohesion in the team, a bit of familiarity in the side. I think things might click for Maidstone next season. Obviously, a lot of people aren't exactly as hopeful as ourselves. Sean, this is not a direction towards you in being negative or anything like that, but it's just your turn to say something and contribute to the conversation. Speaking of George Elokobi, of course, since he's come in, no league wins in how many is it now? 20?
It's 25 overall. I believe it's 19 for him.
Okay.
Of those, and Hack had the last 6 from memory.
Okay.
So
yeah, almost 20 league games without a win. 4 points accrued in that time. We are the lowest lowest point gainers in this calendar year by a large margin. We've got 4 since January the 1st. Next lowest in the league is Yeovil, who are also obviously coming down with us. They got 16. So 4 times less than the next lowest. Obviously, you're going to end up where we are. So a lot of people obviously weren't at the time very happy with George's appointment. Obviously, some were, some weren't. Since then, it's probably gone a little bit more downhill. I think you could say, in the opinion of the fans, in a general consensus way. But in your opinion, do you think that there's a sort of philosophy in place? Do you think there's anything that's been implemented, or the signs are there for something being implemented under George that's different to Hack? Because I know a lot of people have been saying that the football hasn't changed, and if anything, we've gone a bit more downhill. Do you think there's any sort of foundations being laid out there by George?
I think results-wise, it's worse than it was under Hack.
Mhm.
Clearly, you can check the statistics and look at the league table and see that it's not gotten any better in terms of the position we're in. He left us bottom. We've stayed there ever since. The quality of football at times has probably surpassed what we played under Hack in the first half of the season. Not just the brief moments, be it the 5 minutes against Notts County last weekend, but there's considerable spells. The game at Halifax I commentated on, probably a good 15-20 minutes of that game we've played very well.
The whole AC game.
Yeah, exactly. The FA Trophy game from minute 1 to minute 90. Good 15 minutes at the end of the first half against Chesterfield, and we'd hope we'd come out at the start of the second half as well, and did pretty much the same for 5, 6, 7 minutes until the goal went in. But this has always been the trouble for Maidstone this season. Whoever has been the manager, the momentum to keep hold of a game has just not been there for long enough. It's only ever been 10, 15, 20-minute spells. So the problem's been there the whole season. George needs to be judged on a whole season with his own players. You see it with so many managers coming in mid-season. I mean, you're looking at Leicester and Dean Smith at the moment for playing as we're going on. They're not doing anything that different from how it was under Brendan Rodgers. But it's just a case of having to persist with the same players and the same setup and just hoping it will work, not doing anything differently. You look at someone like Roy Hodgson, who's managed to come in and knows the place well at Palace, and you wonder, could George have got a similar outcome when he came in? He came in absolutely balling, did Hodgson. He come in, got those first 3 wins and guaranteed them safety in an instant with a shed load of goals. Because that's a Maidstone link, so that helps.
We get Roy Hodgson in.
That would be terrific.
Roy back.
But
Terrific.
it would be terrific. But yeah, it's having that sort of impact, and of course, it's just the absolute spanking we got at York, the way Hack left, the way that George came in and was set to come in straight away. It's we've really got to see what it's like next season. I don't see George being given long, in the same way that Hakan wasn't given that long last season, because there could well have been a similar scenario for how Jay left in the August of that last season in the National League, because the owners didn't want to do it too early this season with Hakan, because you have to look at the signings. Like you said earlier, Nigel, Sol was signed at the end of the first week of June. Hayley Gandor was another permanent signing near the end of June, along with Jack Corley.
I did check. I put my All You Need to Know video out on Seoul on the 8th of June, so I can't imagine that was much more than a few days after. So yeah, it confirms it was really early June.
Yeah. So on the 7th, Hayley on the 21st, Corley on the 23rd, Woods on the 27th, all of June. James Alabi came on the 9th of July because, of course, we all know there was a Bromley-esque striker somewhere else in there potentially. We may have seen online at some point or not. We
talk about that anymore.
Indeed. But that, again, showing the transfer policy of the club. Thought we had signed someone, we didn't. We then ended up signing someone who they ended up replacing and was booted out of that club, and we ended up taking them instead. So technically a second choice of a second choice from a second club. And then we didn't sign anybody for another month, and that was Liam Vincent the night before the Altrincham game.
Mm-hmm.
So that was literally our pre-season, signing up everybody else we already had. Those 5, one of whom was already there the previous season, and then one of 300 emergency fullbacks that may or may not have come off. So, it just didn't really come off for us this season. And I think regardless of who the manager had been this season, I honestly don't think we had a chance to stay up with the way the recruitment went. So we have to judge George on his, that's new on ITV2 next week, Judge George. We have to judge George on his signings that he makes and the start he gets. Jay didn't get very long in that season. We got relegated. Hakan stemmed the tide from that October that we had, that September, October we had last season in National League South. If George has a similar experience, we start off top in August, September, October, it fizzles a bit. Will the board be as patient as they were with Hakan? I would hope so. But I know, I don't know how much more in the tank George has got. Empathy, sympathy from the owners. It depends on how much more they back him than they did Hakan these last couple of seasons. Certainly, it seems like they backed him more in South than they did in National League this season. So it's really got to see what he does at the start of next season, who he brings in, what the start's like. But I do fear that if we aren't top 7 consistently from August, from minute 1 onwards, if we're not in that top 7, and then ultimately top 3, I think would be my minimum hope for what we can achieve next season, then I think George could be on a very slippery slope and could be out by Christmas if it's a similar season to the COVID one, when we're sort of tickling the cusp of 8th, 9th, 10th and struggling a little bit to just get that extra ounce of quality. You're sort of thinking
you're in trouble.
Yeah, and I just hope that he's given the time, he's given the resources and the players with which to sign. The murmurings we're getting, the people we think we might be seeing signed up for the current squad, and those we're looking at. And as you've already pointed out, Nigel, getting it done early. And like you said, Joe, whilst the playoffs are still going on in all of these divisions. And that's why I've gone through the specific dates, had them written down, because it took bleeding 4-5 weeks from the end of last season into the summer to actually get people on board. And that was the one thing I remember with Hakan's interview. We've got to get the players in and get the signings and get backed.
It was all very lastminute.com, wasn't it? It was all cobbled together. Just, you could tell, I think the initial targets just weren't acquired. And I think, like you said, we kind of settled for backups of backups and third choice player here and second option there and a few different kind of sort of C category players that we were looking at.
Happens everywhere throughout the league. You have to look
Yeah.
at the likes of Spurs and Chelsea this season in the top flight in the Premier League, and some of the players that have been brought in for certain managers, and then your Tuchels and your Potters and your Contes have all gone and had players bought for them. So then the other manager that comes in has got to try and get these players that he doesn't want to play for them in a way that they haven't asked for. You know, like Cucurella, Porro having to come in for Conte as they had to get rid of Jed Spence, you know, things like that. So there's so many different combinations of, you know, these players being hack players and wondering how many of the players we have in the squad might stay now that Hakan's team potentially is still a division below us, not competing with us. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how many of that clan that was there from the title winning side will want to stick around and stay with George, because it seems like he's got a decent enough relationship. As we've all pointed out, he's played in that title winning side. You know, you only have to think back 12 months ago this week, he was playing in his last ever professional match, scoring the goal in his last ever professional match and getting a guard of honour from both sides. You know, last time we'd seen something like that on a football pitch was full-kit wanker John Terry getting that at Stamford Bridge, you know. So it showed you the level that he is held at this club. And I just hope that he gets a good enough start to next season for what he achieved in that year. The 2 or 3 years, I'd say, he didn't do that much on the pitch, but he did a lot off the pitch during that title-winning season. And even when he came back and helped George, we commented on it in the Torquay home win. You know, indeed, he was around the squad, and it seemed as though that was something we'd see a bit more of throughout the season. He faded away, as did the side, and you did wonder, oh, we'd seen what George can do before to get a side pumped up. Can he achieve that? So clearly, you know, things had already gone this season by the time Hack had gone. I think most people need to admit that and think, last 3 months you've got and the deficit you've got, you're not going to change this. We've all said that we've been planning for next season from April 1st. I think that's poppycock. We've probably been planning since about end of February, to be honest, at the very latest, because, you know, there's been nothing else for us to play for this season other than the FA Trophy. As soon as the FA Trophy went, the season died. All hope was gone because you wanted that magic to rub off from one to the other. So, yeah, very long story, very short. Need to judge him on the August results. If we're sat there a la Ebbsfleet with 100 points come the end of next season, fine. Just hoping that come August, we've got a few wins in a row to start the season off. The sooner he gets that first win next season, the better. Because you remember when we went down last time, Weymouth at home, Welling away, both of those were losses. It was toxic around the club. It was nasty. And I know there's a bit of nastiness around because of everything that's been going on this season, and some of the statements have been made by the owners. But I just think that the only way to get around that is a win. Opening day, wherever it is. Get it done. Crap, turgid 1-0 win in the 91st minute. No one will care how it's done, just as long as we get it done. That's the key thing.
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm of a very similar kind of mindset. I think that if we're not within a point or two of the top three by end of August, mid-September, there's going to be some big questions getting asked. I think we don't really have an option to not hit the ground running. We're going into a league of much lower competition. I don't want to sound as harsh as that is, but it is. The worst teams in the National League would probably win the South, as the nature of the beast is. So, I think really our main competition next season is going to be the likes of Yeovil and Torquay, really, isn't it? Oxford, if they don't go up in the playoffs and retain their decent players. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully we sign Lolos. But yeah, that's a little pick of mine. But yeah, I think we've seen a lot of kind of harshness from George, a lot of cutthroat sort of attitude in recent weeks in how he's kind of tearing apart the squad. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing if it goes well. If it doesn't, he's going to get a lot of stick for tearing up what could have been a potentially decent team. In losing Biddle Williams, losing a Lowell, losing Luke A, all those sort of players, the favourites of last year, and Tom Hadler, and you name it. Gavin Hoyt, someone we're probably going to see in the next couple of weeks move on as well, just because the trend is at the moment, if you're getting a bit older and a little bit injury prone, you're probably out the door. So it does seem like that's the way it's going. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. I think you're right, Sean, that he's got to get that win early on, just to kind of silence those critics, prove the point that he can do it. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got to say on it. Nigel, we'll come to you just for your kind of last thoughts on what you think the process needs to be going into next season in terms of results wise. How much time do you think Elokobi deserves or was earned, if you can say that?
Yeah, it's going to be the same thing, isn't it? It's what you just said. The record that we've got is going on. The points that we've picked up this calendar year, come the first week in August next year when the season starts, that record's going to become 26, 27, 28. It's still going to be hanging over the player. So, like you say, that win is important. Get that monkey off your back, as they say, and again, it's like what you just said. He's going to be proved on that, isn't he? On the players that he retains from the squad and the players the new players that he gets in. There is an argument that if he gets new players in, they're not going to have that package to carry on next season. So, but then at the same time, they're not going to have that experience of playing in front of a Maidstone crowd. So, it's just getting that balance right. It's getting that team. What we've said, that the failings of this season, he's got to get right. He's got to get that team cohesion. Don't necessarily have to have the 11 best players in the league. Just a couple of the best players in the key positions, like, i.e. your goalie, a good goal scorer, and then build a team around that, get them all playing the same sort of similar mode to what he wants to play, the way he wants to play. I mean, it looks like from the games that he's been playing that he's looking to go the wing back role. The wing back's pushing on for it at the back. That's pretty much how he's set up. But like you said, we can't judge him because they're not his players. You can't justify. You can set a team up, but then you're talking about the Halifax game. Tom Hadler makes that mistake, palms the ball out. You can't legislate for that. You can have all the build up, all the team talks, and the motivational speaking that you want. Set the team up how you want to play. But if you've not got those players to do that, they're not performing to the standards that you want in that position. You're always going to be under pressure, aren't you? So, yeah, like you say, you've got to judge him on results next season. How we start, the first 6 weeks of the season is going to be key, I think, because we were saying coming back in the car on Saturday evening, you play a quarter of your games. Up to like mid-September, you play a quarter of your league games. So, that's a pretty much decent barometer, I think. I mean, and there's also another thing is there's going to be more teams, isn't there, next year? Like when we did the National South last time, it was only 20. It's a 20-team league. It's going to be a 24-team league. So, you really have got to hit that ground running and be at the top, because it takes a lot of the pressure off. If you're in the mid-table, teams are expecting to come and beat you, and it just adds more and more pressure just in this season.
Yeah, I think if you fail in that first kind of 6 to 8 weeks of the season, and you're lacking a good 10 plus points behind the league leaders at that stage, you're kind of writing off your season before it started. At least in an automatic promotion hope, you're not really going to stand much of a chance of catching league leaders. I know if, at any point in the season you were 10 points behind Ebbsfleet this year, you didn't stand a chance in hell. So yeah, it's really important to get that good start. Obviously, that will intimidate other teams in the league as well, make life a little bit easier for ourselves. Thank God there's going to be no Dorking in the National League South this season, because I'm sick of going there and losing.
But watch out, Farnborough. Farnborough, the Dorking. They're exactly
Great.
the same.
We'll look forward to that one. But yeah, that is, I think, all I've got to say on it. I think we've all summarised everything pretty well there. Obviously, we've taken a look over this season. We've taken a look at our predictions from the start of the season. As fun as that was, I'm hoping for slightly more success in those predictions for next season. We will be doing another podcast relatively soon, once the playoffs are over, talking about the National League season, our predictions in that one. That's pretty interesting. I know Nigel's pretty much got spot on with Woking, and one of us got the league winners prediction right. We won't talk about who that was yet, but I think you can kind of tell. But yeah, so there will be that podcast coming out, and of course, around the start of the season, end of pre-season time, there will be, of course, our upcoming season predictions for next year's National League South campaign. So thank you all so very much for watching. If you've made it this far, do subscribe to the channel. You obviously like the content enough to have made it right to the end with myself, Sean and Nigel. So thank you to you boys for joining me this evening.
You're welcome.
And I think that's going to be it. So we'll all see you in the next one.
Take care.
Nice one. Oh, that's the wrong one.
Yeah, stop record button.